All right, back again. More of this. I feel like now we'll get into it. L'étourdit by Lacans, Jacques Lacan. But before then, you can find this on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify. Links in the description with Patreon account. Only if you have the dough. If not, don't feel obliged. My goal is to earn enough to pay for the podcast servers, because that's like $12 a month for some reason. So if we could cover that, that'd be cool. But if not, whatever. But for now, I'm still joined by Ben to continue l'étourdit. What the hell should we talk about now?
Sex.
Sex. All right. Let's talk. I just had sex. How's the song go?
She shook me all night long.
Oh yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Who shook me all night long?
I'm gonna go get
I
my
don't
guitar.
remember. See, that's the very Lacanian problem. Who shook me all night long?
Who shook me all night long? Why?
I don't know.
But like, why is it
Okay.
a Lacanian problem?
Well, yeah, because sex has nothing to do with like the person, the other person. It usually doesn't have very much to do with the others. Very like masturbatory.
That's interesting. Can you say more? Because I'm thinking of the image. Have you ever seen American Psycho?
Yes.
So there's a moment in that film when he's having sex with two sex workers. I believe that they're sex workers. He's having a threesome, and he's spending all this time looking in the mirror, and flexing as he's looking in the mirror, having sex with these women.
Okay.
And it's very clear that he's not at all interested in them.
Yeah.
Like the act of sex for him is a self gratification. Yeah. So that's
it's
what immediately
like
popped
the
into my
idea
head.
of him having sex with two women, and it's like a pornographic fantasy too. And I mean, yeah, and that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about there's no sexual relation, but we're constantly trying to make up for the sexual relation, and you're never having sex with the subjectivity of the other.
Sure.
The other as a subject, because there's only room for one subject in the symbolic, in a very, very, very basic sense.
Yeah. You can't experience someone else's life. You can't.
They're also having a very masturbatory experience, but you have a phantasmatic understanding and experience of yourself and of the other.
Right.
We all have that. We all kind of can relate to when you're especially now that pornography is so prolific or it's just all over the place, this weird experience when you're having sex and you think well, do I look sexy right now?
Yeah
Probably not.
Yeah.
First off.
No. And
but you're always it's always mediated by this image of yourself and of the other, and you can't really what's going on in your dirty bits.
Yeah.
You can't really say or imagine. You can only experience, feel and experience the pleasure of the erogenous zones.
Yeah. So what do those mean then? What does that sensation mean for Lacan?
Nothing.
Nothing. It's just
it's absence. And so kind of the psycho, to draw out more of a psychoanalytic theoretical point, is that well, this kind of absence first off, it occurs very, very late in life. You're 14, 15, 16, 20, 26, 30,
sure,
whatever, when you first have sex.
Yep.
But you have this kind of experience of inarticulable, unimaginable sensations or something like that in other erogenous zones, your mouth.
Yeah.
Or when you take a dump.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lacanian, Lacan expands that to the voice and the gaze.
Right.
Are also erogenous zones.
I mean, it makes sense to me.
And
but what does that mean then?
Yeah. But and so
here?
that's the kind of template for enjoyment.
Right.
It is this kind of like solipsistic, phantasmatic activity.
Yeah, and it's stubbornly...
We like... We think that like, okay, now I'm going to have this like unique, authentic, intimate relation with another person because like I'm having sex with them.
Yeah, right.
And that, I mean, that's not to deny that that never happens.
Mm-hmm.
But it rarely happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what then... Because I'm just trying to think about this in terms of the impossibility of the real. Mm-hmm. If I was to try to sketch that, which obviously will be a failed attempt because it's the real, would then imagine...
I mean, it might be the only attempt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Would then... As we were kind of saying in the last episode, that a relationship not predicated upon sex would be the one that would be, to some extent, would enter that zone of the real, right? So we are always already, and we can think about this in two different levels. We can think about this in terms of the way that, like, overtly, things like pornography or Hollywood or something, like, fucks with us and gives us an image of what that's supposed to look like. But
and it's easy to say that this is bad, but like I think it's important not to underestimate the effects of like merely having sex like articulated has on us. Like you'll see, say, someone like Zizek, not someone like you'll say Zizek, who's great and whose work should be read, but like comes out with these like explosive lines like, don't demystify the vagina.
Oh.
And, like, okay, he's trying to make a Lacanian point. Like, no, we need to keep abstinence as a part of sex. But it's, I think, like, super important not to underestimate how much, just simply articulating sex, articulating different sex acts, articulating the different sexual organs, and then, like... the ways that this permeates like in our lives in the form of like gender, in the form of like our social relations, is hugely, I mean, has like direct immediate effects. Like when you're like getting down and banging and you're like, okay, like I know what this part, like I know this is the clitoris, and so like I think it's important to be careful not to glorify the absence. Mm-hmm. But the Freudian like point is to recognize the absence is necessary. And where is it necessary, right? And it's
But it seems to me like Zizek is kind of naive to think that like quote unquote demystifying the vagina would actually perform that function, because it seems to me like for Lacan you could never actually fully demystify anything. Like, well,
it's of course like Zizek says demystify the vagina, and then of course is not talking about sex education.
Yeah, no, sure. But still, like as like a mental project, I try to think like maybe we should have recourse to actually going through with these processes, because we can be so confident we can never actually arrive at a fully complete system or a fully realized system. Like it's always going to be, we're always going to arrive at an impasse.
Sure.
So I guess I would ask then, as a point of clarification, when he does refer to it, Zizek, like, do not demystify the vagina, how does he mean it then?
I mean, I don't know how much I can speak to like Zizek's position, but like it means like don't demystify sex.
Sure.
And my point is that like, okay, that's because it's undemystifiable, sure, undemystifiable, but like don't. I mean, it is undemystifiable.
Yeah.
But I think especially Zizek, Zizek's work, not Zizek as a person, but like can translate poorly into like the Western North American world. Like, well, we're talking about like sex education, right?
Yeah.
like no one taught me what a clitoris was in high school.
Yeah, about me neither.
Yeah, and like, so, this kind of has like the same problems as like a lot of what Jordan Peterson says is like, on the surface, like, if you see coming from where they're coming from, yeah, it's kind of makes sense. Especially Zizek, like I want to say, like, yes, as a Lacanian, don't demystify, but like, no, we're like when you say that you're entering a discourse on sex education, and where was I going? So,
I feel like you were saying that it's too much of a risk to just say that without qualifying it to some extent, given the context, because like it's a little bit risky to say something like that because of all like the assault on things like sex education or on anything like that. And we should recognize this is like a pretty big digression from like Lacan's project. You'd be like, I'm not interested in, like, I don't care. Yeah. But still.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say straight up, it's not a digression.
Okay. Well, then I'm really happy that we're talking about it.
I think like first off, the problem is like Zizek comes out with his bombastic statements and then no one reads anything else, right?
Sure.
And that's not his fault. Like he got in a lot of trouble for these like these articles about transgenderism.
Okay.
And like, okay, he's like, in part, yeah, he's using weird right-wing like tropes and examples, like, yeah, if like gay people can get married, then animals will get married, and it's an infinite regress. And like this needs qualification. Like, first off, like you need to recognize, like, not use examples that were used on Fox News.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But like we should also like keep in mind, like Marx's refrain that like often the right knows the implications of our positions better than we know them. Sure. Right? So
that's a quote I've heard often, but I've never actually seen it in words. Yeah. But it makes sense.
But I mean, yeah, I couldn't give you a citation. Yeah, but it's true. I mean, and you see, like, when we see, like, things like, oh, queer people are destroying Western civilization.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah. Like, if Western civilization is predicated on everything that, like, oppresses queerness, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of Marx's point. And so like, in that way, like, sure, you're using right-wing tropes, but, like, why the fuck shouldn't I marry a pig?
Yeah.
Like, or like a inanimate object, or whatever. Or let me have my, like, polymorphous perversity.
Yeah.
And that's not... And yeah, it's nonsense to say that, like, the transgender... being a transgender or being gay or anything is equatable, is equable with that. So how do we think of gender and sexuality in a way that doesn't lead to that logic, right? So, and that's Zizek's point. Okay. Is that the way we're thinking, like, no, we can just name more genders, name more sexualities. And, like, he wants to say, first off, that's the logic of capital.
Okay.
And second off, it leads to, like, reductio ad absurdum. And that's because we're using, or you're thinking of it in terms of, like, meaning. Sexuality in terms of meaning and in terms of acts.
Right.
So, like, we can create more identities, and, like, we can define more things we can do. And, like, as a Lacanian, like, and an American, I want to say, like, yes, let's define more things that we can do.
Yeah.
No, let's not. Like, we need to recognize that, like, sexual identity is not key, first off.
Yeah.
Like, enjoyment is.
That's Foucault's thing at the end of the history of sexuality. Like, let's make it a project of bodies and pleasure, not...
Yeah. And that's why, like, sexuation in the Lacanian sense, is tied to... like, it responds to castration. That's what the all and the not all in this article is about.
Right. And there's also the for-all, the for-all and the not-for-all.
Yeah. So the for all men are castrated, or not all subjects are not castrated.
Not all subjects are not castrated.
That's the feminine position. In either case, everybody is subject to the unconscious.
Yeah.
Or nobody is not subject to the unconscious. That's the distinction, right. And that's what we want to get at. That's what the Lacanian position wants to get at, and how that's tied to enjoyment. Mm-hmm. But so, like, your two ways of saying, like, we're all castrated.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, but no, see, you can't even say two ways of saying the same thing. We're all castrated, or no one is not castrated. Okay,
yeah, no one is not castrated.
No one is not. So what, like, you can't say this statement in one way that encompasses both ways of saying in the formulas of sexuation. Either all subjects are subject to the phallic function, all of us are castrated, subject to the unconscious.
Yeah.
Or if you want to say in terms of the not all, the feminine position, say not all subjects are not subject to the unconscious. So nobody is not castrated.
But we can't, it's not saying the same thing as saying everyone is castrated.
See, and that's the point where I can't say yes or no. Because, like, we're both trying to say the phallic function. Yeah. We're both trying to say the phallic function in a universal modality.
Yes.
So, and that's the phi, the phi symbol that we were talking about before. The
circle with the line. The sphere.
It's a fucking Greek letter.
The phi.
It's a phi. So, phi means phallic function. So, either all x, ax, phi x, so all subjects, that's us, are subject to the phallic function.
Right.
Or the barred ax, not all subjects are not subject to the phallic function. And that's not all.
My stubborn brain is like, that's the same thing, though.
Well, yeah. Because we're operating at the universal register. And the not all is not unique. Is like a modality of the universal that you can only really learn to operate with by way of Lacanian psychoanalysis. Because we never... I'm going to make a strong claim that I think you could back up. So the not all only appears in the history of philosophy. First, in Aristotle's logic, he just like straight up rejects it. And that's where Lacan begins. Because we're working in Aristotle's like square of logical modalities, right? And so Aristotle denies that the not all is like a modality of the universal. That's possible. But
right.
So...
Okay.
It's like a negation of the universal.
Right.
But Lacan wants to recognize that it operates as a specific kind of universal. The not all.
Okay.
Whereas the all... So, we're used to thinking there's only one kind of universal. The kind of universal that applies to, like, all of what it's talking about.
Yeah.
Well, then there's the not all. So there's the negated universal, that's not saying that, like, no, it's not, doesn't exist.
So, okay, that reminds me of another part when he says something like, the impossible is embedded within the subject that refutes it. Does that relate to that at all? This is really my...
Yeah, I mean, I have that line highlighted right in front of me, conveniently.
Oh, do you really?
By extending this process, there is born my own formula that there is no universal that must not be contained by an existence that denies it.
There's no universal that is not contained by a being or
an existence.
An existence that denies it.
Yeah. So there are two logical I don't know what the right word, forms, modalities, existence and universality.
Okay. Yeah.
We're going to do Logic 101.
Yeah, let's do it. I know very little about this, so that's exciting.
Neither did Aristotle. So in Aristotelian logic, all statements have to apply. If it's valid, it applies to all things.
Yeah.
So you couldn't say, all things that exist. So, like, you couldn't talk in a universal way about things that can't exist. Like, I couldn't talk about, like, unicorns in a universal way.
You can talk about...
No, you can't.
You can't, okay.
So,
all crows are black.
Yeah. All crows are black. And that's valid only because there are black crows, right?
Yeah.
But all horses... Like, you can't say all horses don't have a horn. That's nonsense, right?
All horses... Yeah, because then you could say all horses don't have a trunk.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you
It doesn't make sense. But that's only true because there don't exist any. So this is kind of a step, an intermediary step sometime during the Enlightenment, during English logical positivism, something like that, where you start distinguishing between the all and the universal predicate and the existential.
Right.
Right. So the formula of sexuation deal with both. That's what the backwards E is for.
The backwards E is dealing
existential. So there exists. So, like, with the masculine formula of sexuation, we say all X, period, phi X.
Right, okay.
Is it? EX, period, not phi X. So, it's a contradiction. They're both, the masculine and feminine formulas are contradictions because you're sexuated as an incomplete subject. So the masculine formula says all subjects are subject to the phallic function, and there exists a subject who is not subject to the phallic function.
Right.
And here we're working with basic set theory.
Right.
Like
what is set theory, Ben?
Well, set theory is how to count to one. But this is like a basic rule. You can only form a set because there's something outside the set.
Okay.
So you can only form all men are castrated because there's one man who isn't. And this is like harkens back to Freud's myth of the primal father in Totem and Taboo.
Okay.
So in Totem and Taboo, the myth is that there's the father who bangs all the women and has all the children, but the children can't bang any of the women because the father says no. So they got to kill him.
Sure.
Right? And so the father is like what we were talking about last time with the function that says no, that regulates your desire, whatever. And I said that when we talk about like the big other doesn't exist, the father doesn't exist, it only exists retroactively as like it had to. It's a condition of possibility.
Yeah.
I don't.
So all right, fine. So if
sometimes I lose myself.
No,
just
and
going.
Understandably. All right, so we have set theory that is dealing with the thing you describe. You know, the fact that there might be the thing that exists outside.
The universal.
Right. What is that? And this is going to take us into a little bit of a new direction, I think.
That's good.
How does that play into Lacan's use of math or mathematics? How does that work for him, or why does he use it?
Okay. Yeah, so we're trying to formulate like what it is to be, what a universal is, and like what it is to identify as a universal. And
right.
Like, so we're used to the usual refrain of like man in terms of human beings, like the history of man, or like the nature of mankind, or whatever. And so that when we're talking about masculine identification, that's what we're talking about. We mean everyone.
Yeah.
So the feminine identification differentiates itself from that. But so when we talk about math, we're trying, basically the idea is signifiers follow like strict logical rules.
Yeah.
And thought, by virtue of always occurring in language, follows the logical laws of the signifier.
Mm-hmm.
And runs into the same impossibilities. And so by formalizing these logical impossibilities, we can try to get in a very precise way at the real.
Oh, that's interesting. But like, how?
Well, the real is the impossible, and only the impossible.
Square root of -1.
Yeah.
But that's an imaginary number. That's the imaginary.
Well, maybe imaginary is a misnomer. It produces imaginary effects. Lacan does say somewhere that the phallus is the square root of -1.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah.
Oh.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
No, yeah, he says that.
All right, well, there we go. I'm ready to be a Lacanian. So we kind of touched on this, but like when... Actually, not this, what I'm about to ask. When he writes existence or exists, and he writes it ex-sis or sistence, like existence, why? Why does he do that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is... well, it's starting like straight up borrowing from Heidegger, who writes about existence. So... obviously, Heidegger doesn't. He writes in German, but who cares? We don't speak German. So the idea is like, so what words end with cis? So insists, exists. So it insists, but it exists. So it insists from without. It's external. Whereas when we talk about insisting, something internal is insisting. And so when that's kind of the Heideggerian distinction, but it ties into the status of the unconscious as symbolic, that Lacan terms extimacy, EX-STAMACY.
So not intimacy, extimacy. All right.
So it's the unconscious is what is most intimate, but because it's an effective language, and only an effective language, it's external. It's outside of you. It's in the big other. So like your desire is the discourse of the other. Okay. It's all articulated outside. So what's one of Lacan's phrases in Seminar 11 is that like it's in you more than you, right? So it's what's most in you, but it's more than you because it's outside of you. It's external.
It's bigger than
it's
you.
language. Yeah,
It's the big other.
The big other.
Well,
The
that
big
makes sense.
other already told you. The big other knows what's in you more than you, but you don't,
Right.
and you can't.
So he says that there are two existences,
Yeah, there are two ways of existing.
and that includes the insisting.
No.
No, it doesn't. Okay. All right. Fair.
I mean, yeah, it does,
Oh my god.
but it's more obvious than that.
Okay.
Guess, you can do it.
Two ways of existing.
Yeah, there are two.
I don't know.
There's a common theme.
You exist with what is out, what you present, and what's on the
you
inside.
you can only do one at a time.
You only do one at a time.
Yeah, but there are two.
You. I don't know. I don't know.
It's sexual difference.
Oh, it's either the masculine or the feminine.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Well, fine then. Because I was just assuming it was like a claim about a fucking individual person, but I see.
It
Well,
is.
it's Jesus Christ.
But see, that's the thing. You can't have it all.
Yeah, I probably should have guessed that then.
And I mean, I think that's like part of the something that's uniquely hard about thinking Lacanian psychoanalysis in 2019 is we're so especially in 2019 North America, we're so not used to thinking sexual difference.
Yeah.
There's a reason why gender Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity and all these discourses about transsexuality, transgenderism proliferate and emerge in English.
Yeah.
And I think that is at least in part tied to the fact that our language isn't gendered.
Yes.
But so then we have a hard time thinking about okay, so is there something that this difference was trying to get at beyond the outward appearance of your genitals?
Yeah. Yeah, or how in French, gun is just is a masculine.
Yeah. And it's
is it just coincidence?
yeah, and we're used to associating I like that with the gun with something phallic.
Le
But
fusil gun.
there are very weird things that I can't think of right now. But everything is gendered.
Oh yeah, no, everything.
And it's not someone sat down one day and was this is male, this is female,
Yeah,
male, female.
that would have been the primal father doing that.
It's if you're born speaking these languages, it makes sense in a sort of primal way that's prior to sense.
Yeah.
And it's has nothing to do with overtly with the thing.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to get at with the real of sex.
Sure.
Is it's a contingent this or that.
Yeah. Yeah. So when he says then, and this is the next section, and we already kind of talked about this, but when he says that the absence of there is no sexual relationship, and then goes into a number of sub kind of sections,
Yeah.
each dealing with the absence of the sexual relationship and something else. So the absence of the sexual relationship and the two existences, the absence of the sexual relationship and the two universals, the absence of the sexual relationship and the phallus,
Yeah.
and then that's it. We already kind of touched on that to some extent, just because there's embedded within it a kind of impossibility with imagining the sexual relationship.
But its absence is a positive term and real.
Its absence is a positive term in the real
And real.
and real. Okay.
It's a negativity functioning as a positive term.
Because it being absent implies that
No, because
ideal.
it's real.
Yeah, the real being the I'm just gonna say ideal, but like being the impossible,
Mm-hmm.
we associate it with a positivity.
Yeah, we create a semblance of it. So, okay, so this is a joke. So, to borrow from Alenka Zupančič, one of my favorite authors, uses this joke to demonstrate the status of the real. So, a man walks into a cafe and orders a coffee with no cream. And the barista says, "Sorry, sir, we don't have any cream. Would you accept a coffee with no milk?"
But he didn't ask for any cream.
The point is, it's the negativity. So would be with no cream is different than with no milk.
Right.
So it's the negativity is functioning.
Oh, I see. Okay. I can't illustrate that in my mind, obviously.
Well, yeah. But so
So the man walks in and says he doesn't want cream. Barista
a coffee
responds,
with no cream. The point
a
is,
coffee with no cream.
the negativity affects the coffee.
Right. Because it's different to say I want it with no cream than saying I want it with no milk.
Yeah.
Fuck.
And you kind of like...
What are these riddles? This witchcraft.
I mean, and you kind of reach like this irreducible point. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I see how the concepts work.
Yeah.
But like, okay, I don't give a shit about this dude's coffee order.
Well, it's a noble effort for that author to try to like illustrate it in the form of a joke.
Well, I mean, she's like well known. But like, so the point is, it's conceptually operating there, and that conceptual formation operates elsewhere.
Right.
And so, like, for something important to note is that like jokes hold a privileged place in psychoanalysis. Like Freud writes 3 books about formations of the conscious, right?
Yep.
Dreams, slips of the tongue, and jokes.
Yeah. Yep.
And Lacan makes jokes. His seminar on jokes takes a privileged place because they operate in language.
Yeah.
Like as we've talked about, linguistic formation and structure are reality. So like that the real can be seen functioning in this like sort of silly joke about coffee really is just like a happy coincidence for us.
Like it seems to hit the point home that, you know, language is insufficient, you know, to possibly communicate this zone, but is at the same time the only means by which we can do it.
Well, and it exists only because of language. Because language creates this, creates the real as impossible, right?
Right.
And so Lacan gets this in the seminar 7. He tries to talk about das Ding, the thing, as what's the beyond of the signified.
Right.
And he has this like beautiful reading of Antigone, outside the law, but like it's a huge problem that he's in this essay. Like the non-relation formalizes the same wall that he reaches there. Like you don't want dusting. You get once you start aiming for the beyond of the signified, you're under the sway of death drive.
Okay, how so? And I'm just thinking about this in terms of like Kant saying you can't arrive at the thing in itself. Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of parallel there? Well,
it becomes. I mean, first off, you're not aiming at anything, and it becomes like repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
And Lacan attaches it to, like, for Kant, I think, like, it is right to associate das Ding with the thing itself. For Kant, it's just like reason drives itself into nonsense, right? For Lacan, when you're trying to think about das Ding, it's attached to enjoyment. And when you start enacting, like, I'm trying to get beyond the signified, means I'm trying to get beyond the social.
Mm-hmm.
Means I'm trying to get beyond whatever other people can offer me.
Yep.
Whatever I can get from them.
Mm-hmm.
And this becomes highly destructive. And like the usual example, Lacan's example, is Sade. Like he has the essay Kant FX Sade, the highest good is the highest evil. But I think you see this in contemporary, in like very naive like contemporary thought. Like, no, I have something to say that's beyond language, or like I need to like get out, like, away from people and like get in touch with myself, or like all these ideas about like I need to get beyond the social, be outside the social.
Yeah.
And Lacan's point is like, no, it's self-destructive.
Good luck. Have fun.
It's like you either
bring a life jacket.
You either get to this kind of like incel discourse.
Sure.
Where like, okay, I've been excluded from the social, and all I can do is blow it the fuck up.
Yeah.
Or a kind of self-destructive, like everyone who like thinks they've reached some enlightenment outside of language, outside of social relations, is like the same and an idiot. Right? And has nothing new to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the point. Like, no, we need to speak this impossibility.
Yeah.
That's a tie in every social relation. The impossibility of the sexual non-relation is the kind of I want to say archetype, like the structure of every social relation is non-relation.
So then to kind of look at it,
that was a big long lecture.
No, but it was great. It was great because it put it into context for me.
Yeah.
But like the next section deals explicitly with that question that I like presented there. Whereas there's a part in it, and we haven't talked about Schroeder yet, and I feel like Schroeder has an important part.
Well,
in this.
we've talked about psychosis.
Well, yeah, without attaching his name to it, and I guess the narrative of the father sits in with him as well. But this section here introduces what he calls the third and fourth formula of sexuation.
That's the feminine formulas.
Those are the feminine ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first and second are in universal and existential, and they form a contradiction. Those are the masculine formulae.
Okay.
And the second and third are the feminine formulae.
The third and fourth are the feminine formulae, and what are their other names? Because for the masculine, you have first and second existential and universal, and then
they're also existential and universal. Because existential and universal are logical form. So you would read the masculine formula would be all X, phi X. So every subject is subject to the phallic function. EX, not phi X. So not ever, or so there exists one subject who is not subject to the phallic function.
Right.
And so that's one way of conceiving the all X.
Yeah.
The other way is the feminine formula. So you have the all X is negated and phi X is negated. So not all X, not phi X. Not every subject, not all. This is the new Lacanian form of universality. Is the not all. Yeah. So not all subjects are not subject to the phallic function.
Yeah.
Or no one.
So you get the more of that same.
Another way that like I've tried to sometimes think of it like initially is like no one is you could say everyone is subject to the phallic function, or no one is exempt from the phallic function.
Yeah.
So the feminine formula are not all X. Not all subjects are not subject to the phallic function.
Right.
And there does not exist anyone, or not EX. Where is it? You totally have it right here.
Yeah.
So EX negated, phi X negated. So there does not exist anyone who is not subject.
The negated is denoted by that line on top.
Yeah, the line above it.
Okay,
the
bar above it. The bar above it.
So it negates the all X. So it negates the universal and the existential.
Right.
But only the existential negates the phallic function.
Yeah.
So they're not all X are subject to the phallic function.
Right.
Which would normally mean like, okay, not everyone is subject to it. or there's someone that's not.
Well, no, yeah.
Except
They are not.
there does not
not
exist.
subject.
There does not exist anyone who is not subject to it.
Right. Lest we concede that, the real was possible and the real was like inhabitable.
That's because the primal father
Yes,
on the masculine side.
Yeah.
But that's a semblance, right?
Right.
So it's still like possible. Like you think of it, like it's possible in the loosest sense.
Right. So what?
So not all subjects are castrated, but there doesn't exist a subject who isn't castrated.
Yeah, sure. So what else is there to say about this then? What haven't we touched on? What more you got? What about the heteros?
That's women.
Heteros women.
It's a way of that's like a way of thinking of women. Because part of this is like there is no woman.
Because they occupy the real?
Well, because there's part of the formula of sexuation, or beneath the formula of sexuation, as they're presented in Seminar 20, they're graphs for like jouissance.
Yeah.
And on the masculine side, there's the barred subject, and on the feminine side, there's barred women. So, like I mentioned earlier, like we talked about, like the universal man means like mankind.
Yeah.
There's no universal woman, right?
Okay.
And so when we talk about the not all, the feminine not all, we mean the negate, or we mean the universal in that kind of sense.
Right. So that's my half.
Yeah.
So for anyone that
So there's a second.
I should say because we haven't said it yet. When Ben gave me this text to read, he only gave me the first half. And immediately before recording this, I realized I only had the first half. So I'm going to write this in the description as well.
We could say étourdit, the name, has something to do with turns, and the essay is divided into 2 turns.
Okay.
We've discussed the first turn
Yeah.
on sexual difference.
Right. Okay, So yeah.
There is a second turn on the analytic discourse.
And we will do that one because we
YOLO.
should. Because YOLO. Yeah, you got anything else about this?
Nothing that I can think of.
Well, shit. All right, well, we'll close that off there then, ending the first turn of l'étourdit. For anyone that listened this far, thank you. I hope you got something out of it, and if you have any problems with what Ben or I said, you know how to downvote, you know how to leave comments and angry ones.
If you can't say it, it doesn't exist.
If you can't, exactly. But keep it cool. I get too many comments that are like, "You suck," and obviously, but just elaborate.
What?
Like I want to know why. Like, give me more. But yeah, if you made it this far, cool. And we'll see you next time. Peace out. Yeah.